Good evening and welcome to this meeting of Oxford City Council on Monday, 27th of January 2005. Please note that the meeting is being recorded for the purposes of public accountability. We also have some nice new microphones to play with, and they seem to work. Just press the button on the right, which is marked talk, and when you finish talking, press it again to be turned off. Is Councillor Goddard here? No. We have scheduled a tribute to former Councillor Jim Campbell, who sadly has passed away since our last meeting. However, Councillor Goddard, who wished to speak, is not in his seat yet, so I will wait for him to arrive. Let's begin with the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've received one apology for absence from Councillor Edward Mundy.
Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So Councillor Yateman and Councillor Haley are running late.
Thank you. No further apologies. Good. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Gant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In respect of my role in the County Council Cabinet, I'd like to declare an interest in motion 16A and motion 16B. And following advice from the monitoring officer, I'll leave the chamber and not take part or vote on those items.
Thank you, Councillor Gant. Any further declarations of interest? Seeing none. Item 3 is the minutes of the last meeting of Council held on the 25th of November. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we are asked to approve the minutes as a correct record. All in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. Item 4 is appointments to committees. Councillor Jarvis, you have a change.
Yes, very simple. It's in the papers, but we are proposing to take Councillor Powell from Planning Review and place them on Audit and Governance, and to swap that seat with Councillor Medman.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. I cannot imagine any reason for objection. Is that agreed? All those in favour? Thank you. Are there any further committee appointments? No. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Goddard is now in his place, so I have to begin with the sad news that, as you will all know, former Councillor Jim Campbell has passed away, and we will have a minute's silence in Jim's memory following some brief tributes, and I have 6 councillors who knew Jim well who would like, who I understand would like to speak. First of all, Councillor Goddard.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor, and apologies for keeping you waiting. Jim was first elected, as colleagues will know, but a few probably weren't quite born at this time, in 1995, in a much larger version of Wolvercut Ward, which existed at the time. It sort of stretched most of the way down the Woodstock Road as far as Polstead Road. I was lucky enough to get elected to the same ward alongside him the very next year, 1996. Served with him as a councillor for that ward until 2002. It was, quite frankly, a privilege. The reason why Jim was asked to stand for the council is because, and this is perhaps a bit obvious to say, he was exactly the sort of person you want as a councillor. He knew his patch fiercely well. He was one of the most kindly and caring people that you could possibly hope to meet, which is not the same thing, of course, as saying that he was in any sort of sense a pushover. If he decided that something was right, then he damn well went for it. That, among many other things, is one of the things that made him such a good colleague. I'm 95% sure that I'm right in saying that Jim was the first Liberal Democrat Lord Mayor of Oxford. Fairly sure that's historically correct, and it is certainly a position which he took a very great deal of pleasure in. One of the earliest memories of both my children is standing by the street down at the bottom end of Woodstock Road, waving at Jim as he went past on the Lord Mayor's parade float, and him looking ridiculously pleased about the whole thing, and I can't say as I blame him. One of my favourite memories, almost of my life, is spending the evening of the 1st of May 1997 in Jim's house on Frenchay Road, watching election results come in. Almost everyone in this place is going to be a little bit of an election junkie. As you'll remember, 1st of May 1997 was a particularly vintage year, and Jim's company, among that of a great many other really quite excited people, was an absolute treat. There's a lot more one could say about Jim, but I will leave that to colleagues. One thing which I reminded myself of in looking at that invaluable website which gives Oxford election results over the years is that he, in 2002, managed the feat of coming joint top in a poll for St Margaret's Ward. Luckily, it was a two-member vacancy, so both he and his colleague Corinna Redmond got elected. But again, that feels like a little bit of a first and something, one of the many things somewhat unique about him. He'll be very much missed.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Brown.
I was actually going to hand over to Councillor Hollingsworth to speak, because you'll hear plenty from me at this meeting, I suspect.
It's a very short statement and it echoes some of the things that Steve has already said. Jim was a wise, a kind, a thoughtful man whose wisdom shone through here and outside. And as a fellow person who's very interested and enjoys poetry, his love of poetry always came through and was something positive about. Others will speak, as Steve has done, about his service to the people of this city, and it's right that tribute should be paid to him for that. But my very brief reflection on his service to people in this chamber, and in particular two of them who had been elected the year before Jim in 1994, and in March 1999 became, apparently, according to Jim, the first pair of city councillors, Oxford city councillors, to become a pair of parents. And everyone had kind words to say from every side of the chamber. But it was Jim, inevitably, who organised a gift from all the councillors to frankly entirely unexpected and also frankly extremely overtired councillors. And we can still reflect on that as the people who received it in our house, and it said everything about what a kind of man he was, and I think it's good for us to reflect on him and give him this tribute.
Thank you, Alex. Councillor Mallock.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I met Jim Campbell in 2001 when I decided to stand in 2002 elections. Apart from being a councillor and colleague, he was a very kind gentleman, and there are a couple of memories. He was a great host because whenever you had the election, then his residents, many colleagues will turn up and he will give a reception and everything. And then obviously he was a Lord Mayor. And the other thing I remember him, on one point he hurt his leg, and he was a very keen cyclist. So he got bicycle modified to pedal with one leg. And he, so this is what I remember about Jim. And he was a nice man. I mean, I echo what Councillor Goddard and the others said.
Thank you, Sarge. Councillor Ros Smith is not here. And Councillor Mary Clarkson is also not here yet. Okay. We have heard speeches from across the chamber and heard how much Jim Campbell was valued and liked across the political divide. I propose that we rise for 1 minute's silence in honour of him.
Lord Mayor, Mary had actually sent me the words that she intended to say about Jim, so I just wondered if perhaps I might be allowed to read it out so that it's on.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So this is what Mary would have said, probably much better than me, had she been here. Jim embodied the very best in liberal values. He was an internationalist, broad-minded, tolerant and kind. When Jim was Lord Mayor in 2006 to 2007, I remember him bringing together Susanna as Sheriff and me as Deputy Lord Mayor and discussing how we could work together as a team. Jim and I also worked together on the Covered Market Scrutiny Group about 10 years ago. I think that was one of the most successful and fruitful pieces of cross-party working that I've experienced on this council. That had much to do with Jim's high intelligence and his collaborative approach. At one point, Fur started to fly because of an inflammatory by-election leaflet. A Labour member of the group resigned in protest. In his typically gracious way, Jim sent a generous email to this Labour member saying how much he valued his work and thanking him for his contribution. He refused to let party politics of a by-election undermine the good work of the group. We kept in touch after he stood down from the City Council in 2014. At the age of 70, he enrolled on an MA course in creative writing at Oxford Brookes, resuming an interest in poetry writing, which years teaching in Kenya and in international schools had left him little time for. He was clearly a gifted poet. He won the first prize in the Writers' Bureau Poetry Competition in 2019. Very sadly, he suffered a serious stroke in 2019, which left him paralysed down the right side and unable to speak. In these times of division and increased unpleasantness across politics, we need to have far more people like Jim. I will miss his wisdom and insight and will remember him with great affection. And just to be clear, those are Mary's words, not mine, but I absolutely concur with them.
Thank you, Susan. We now move to item 5, announcements. I have only one announcement. Today, as I'm sure everyone will know, is Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah, the anniversary of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz in 1945. There was a moving ceremony this morning in the town hall, and particular thanks go to the 5 children from Cheney School, whose project based on memorialising the Holocaust has received royal recognition recently. So congratulations to them, and thank you to them for their very moving participation in the ceremony. I am going to propose that we rise for another minute's silence in memory of the victims of the Shoah and of all genocides. Do we have any announcements from the Sheriff?
No, Lord Mayor.
The Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have one announcement, which is the civic office holders for next year. So just to let everybody know, the next year's Lord Mayor will be Councillor Louise Upton. The Deputy Lord Mayor will be yourself, Lord Mayor, and the Sheriff will be Councillor Andrew Gant. So congratulations to all of them, and we thank them in advance for their service. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and yes, I'm sure it may be a relief, perhaps, to some members of council, and particularly some officers, the time to be demoted. Now that Councillor Ros Smith has taken her seat, was there? I understood that there was something you might wish to say about Councillor Jim Campbell.
That's very kind of you, Lord Mayor. I do apologise to yourself and to everyone for being late. My fault entirely. I answered the phone instead of going straight to the bus stop and had to listen to somebody. Just to say that I do remember Jim Campbell very well. I think the word to describe him would be as a gentleman. If you look in the Oxford Dictionary, the definition of gentleman is somebody who is kind, is gentle with people, and is courteous at all times. The Oxford Dictionary has a slightly different variation on the definition of gentleman, but I have to say that he encompassed both, and I shall miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Ros. Are there any announcements from Chief Executive, Chief Finance Officer, Monitoring Officer? No. Yes. I turn to the City Rector. Any announcements?
Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. Lovely to see everybody. If it's not too late to say Happy New Year. If I may continue on the theme that we've had, it was my privilege to be alongside the Lord Mayor and others this lunchtime. And preparing for this 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, I turned to Genocide Watch, an organisation I do commend. And we may know Gregory Stanton's 10 stages leading to genocide. Stanton then reviewed that and he said that they're not actually stages. This isn't a ladder. They are really 10 processes, and often they happen side by side. And for wonderful people like all of you on Oxford City Council and civic officers, etc., just to be keeping an eye on what may be going wrong on any of those 10 processes at any time. I'm not going to read them now because we don't have time, but I commend Gregory Stanton. But something I will read, because I know that we here are passionate about the next generation, is a letter which an American high school principal used to send to his teachers at the start of every year. Some of you may know this. I am a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no person should witness. I saw gas chambers built by learned engineers, children poisoned by educated physicians, infants killed by trained nurses, women and babies shot by high school and college graduates. So I am suspicious of education. My request is this: help your children become human. Your efforts must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, or educated Eichmanns. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are important only if they serve to make our children more human. As ever, thank you so much for all that you do for our city and for making everybody just act a little more humanely to each other. So thank you. And my apologies, everybody. I have to dash to another event, but thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Anthony. Item 6 is public addresses and questions relating to matters for decision. There are none. Therefore, we move to item 7, the Housing Revenue Account Rent Setting Report 25-26. Councillor Linda Smith, I believe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This report recommends a rise of 2.7% in our council rents and service charges for the next financial year. This is a rise 1% above inflation. This is being recommended because there is a need to maximise income into our housing revenue account in order to properly fund our housing services. Future demands on the HRA include meeting tough new regulatory requirements on safety and tenant involvement. We need to invest in our council homes to keep them up to standard and improve their energy efficiency. We need to continue providing landlord services and responding to repairs in a way which keeps our tenants highly satisfied. And we need to invest in building and buying more of the affordable homes we desperately need in Oxford to provide homes for local people and support the inclusive growth of our city. Our plans for the next 5 years for the HRA include spending £142 million on repairs, maintenance and management costs, £176.5 million on investing in major works to new and existing council homes, improving energy efficiency, building safety improvements and bringing homes up to new legal standards for council housing, and £356 million to build and acquire nearly 1,100 new council homes. This administration is committed to ensuring every penny we collect in rents and service charges from our tenants and leaseholders is spent wisely, and our rents are still great value for money. This rise is an average increase of £3.51 per week. Overall, it means the average rents for council tenants will be £133.66 per week. This compares with an average weekly rent of over £412 for tenants renting from private landlords. I know rent increases are never popular, but the modest increase I'm asking Council to agree this evening will help us to continue to improve as a landlord and put our HRA on a secure financial footing with the ability to invest in our housing stock into the future. So I commend this report to Council. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Can I see any members wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think the time the people going through and the stuff this Labour government bringing in, I think is very rich of us to increase anything. This year, what the people have gone through after COVID and going through hard time, I think although Councillor Smith says is a value for the money and it can do that, I think they should review themselves and look where their vanity projects should be put down and give people relief instead of even £2, £3 going up. So I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to ask for a second. My apologies. Councillor Turner, do you wish to speak now?
Yeah, I was intending to do so formally, but I think given Councillor Malik's suggestion just now, I'll put in just a tiny bit of substance. I mean, this is a rent setting report, but of course it will time with the HRA budget setting. It's fairly easy to make a statement saying, oh, it'd be better if we charge less rent. It's, of course, harder then to decide what you would change. I heard the reference to vanity projects. I'm not sure what vanity projects exist in our housing revenue account, but my invitation and suggestion for councillors, if they're not happy about it, I mean, that's fine, you know, vote against this report, that's okay, but then do bring amendments showing how you would then amend the HRA budget when we come to set our council budget then, you know, whether it's services for tenants, whether it's new kitchens and bathrooms, whether it's new homes, then of course we'll look forward to seeing some extra funding allocated on the general fund to meet the cost of homelessness if we build fewer homes, whether it's work for things like improving the environment on our council estates that would be cut back, because I for one think it might be a little bit harder than is perhaps implied to make do with less money. Truth is, the HRA's in a difficult financial position, and we do need the rents to increase for the reasons that Linda set out.
Are there any further members wishing to speak on this report?
Lord Mayor, my name is mentioned. I have a right to reply, with your permission.
Of course.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Turner say that, bring the amendment, how we do it. When we take over, the council will do that. You, the administration, you're supposed to give people relief, not to inflict further misery on the people who are struggling day by day. And you're supposed to be a labor and socialist party, so-called. So this is why I said this should have been frozen this year instead of creating more on that. That was the point I was trying to make.
Thank you. Are there any further members wishing to speak? Seeing none, Councillor Smith, do you wish to sum up?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We are asked to approve the rent setting for council rented properties, to approve the rent setting for shared ownership dwellings, and to approve the setting of service charges. Oh, and finally, to approve the setting of garage rents. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you, that is a clear majority, but for the sake of propriety, can I see those against? Thank you, and are there any abstentions? Thank you. The next item is the local plan, and I believe this is Councillor Upton to propose.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So in November 2023, this council approved the decision to submit our local plan 2040 for examination to the Planning Inspectorate. We did that, but as you are aware, the planning inspectors have asked us to withdraw it for reasons with which we profoundly disagree. But nonetheless, having been asked to do so, the only sensible thing is for us to comply. By way of background, producing a local plan generally happens every 5 years. It's a massive undertaking. It sets out what we want and where we want to see things happen across the city. It's about employment sites, it's about housing sites, it's about parks and green spaces. It's not just about allocating sites, of course, it also allows us to specify all sorts of things, like the percentage of social housing we want to see on new developments, like insisting on the provision of local apprenticeships, like increasing biodiversity and that kind of thing. So we have just been through that massive undertaking. Our dedicated officers have written detailed and visionary policies to see the city through the next 15 years. So as I said, it is really disappointing that we have got to go back a couple of stages, but this is a moment where we can make a few changes, perhaps update some of the evidence. I anticipate these will primarily be to take account of some of the very recent changes in the national planning policies. But given that, we have set out a timetable in the local development scheme which anticipates that over the next year we will have 2 more consultations. It will be sent to the planning inspectors once it's been agreed again by council. We hope to get it adopted in early 2027, which, as you'll be aware, therefore, is a 2-year delay that this planning inspector's decision has forced on us, which is a great shame, because as I said, we have some fantastic visionary policies like making all new houses have to be net zero in operation, things like that. So I think we're disappointed, but I hope the council will agree that this is the only way forward. So we are going to withdraw our current local plan 2040 and will be relaunching it as a local plan 2042 with a chance to update it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Brown, do you wish to speak now?
Formally second, reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Can I see any members wishing to speak? I see Councillor Smoten first.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I note that since our local plan went out for examination, there have been 2 Oxfordshire local plans that have gone out for Reg 19 consultation. And they've both taken more ambitious energy use targets, both in terms of reducing the energy use intensity compared to our now withdrawn, or about to be withdrawn, local plan, and also putting limits on embodied carbon, whereas our withdrawn plan speaks warmly on the topic, but explicitly notes that as something we didn't think that we could actually do at this juncture. Will we use the opportunity to reconsider if we can catch up to those other local plans in that respect?
Shall I take a number? I had Councillor Fireweather and Councillor Henwood and Councillor Rennan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to ask how much this failure to get a local plan over the line has actually cost the council, or will cost the council, by having to repeat the vast majority of it.
Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think lessons need to be learnt here. I've heard Councillor Upton's statement on this. I'm disappointed to hear that Labour Group haven't learnt the lessons of poor communication and poor connectivity, clearly stated in the Inspectorate's report. We have to take on board these comments. We need to learn, and we need to take note and reflect on our mistakes.
Councillor Rennan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I mean, we have no choice but to go ahead with this new plan. The difficulty is that we know that our neighbouring councils are always difficult, and they don't match up to our targets that we set here as a council, and we want housing. So therefore, this is probably what was going to happen, because it happens every time, that they don't comply or they don't oblige as much as they should. So therefore, what lessons are we going to learn on that front, and how are we going to overcome the difficulties of having these councils next door to us that don't listen on anything?
Are there any further speakers? Seeing none, Councillor Brown, would you like to speak now?
Thank you very much. Yes, I would just like to say a few things. One is, as we have said on a number of occasions previously, the decision by the inspector was both surprising and extremely disappointing. In terms of lessons learned, I'm not sure that there are many easy lessons to learn from this, because the truth is that in any local plan inspection, you are in the hands of an individual inspector. And his decision was surprising and disappointing. Councillor Henwood's particular point I would like to address as well, because he has several times repeated this canard that the inspector said that there was poor communication, poor connectivity. It is not true. It is not in there. And so I don't know where he's getting that from, but that is not part of the reasons for objecting to our local plan. In fact, those issues hadn't even been addressed at the point of the local plan recommendations from the inspector. So I think it is really disappointing. We are going to have to work really hard to make sure that we have a local plan. There are some opportunities, as Councillor Upton has rightly said. And I think that those will be ones that we will take with open arms, and we will work hard to work with neighbouring authorities and to try and bring them with us. There are many things that we can work on together, and we hope that we can do that.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Upton to sum up.
Thank you very much. Yes, just to address some of the individual points. If other councils have come up with some good things, we'll absolutely look to include them. For example, the embodied carbon, we'd had an aspiration to include that, but we felt at the time that there were not sufficiently good ways, robust ways of measuring it, that we could include it. But if some of our surrounding districts can get that through, happy days. I'm sure we will want to include that. The question of finance, we've looked at the staffing levels we have in the planning policy team and think it can be resourced by the existing staff that we have. You said majority needing to be relooked at. I think it really will be a minority. Most of these policies, after all, were supposed to be going into operation in a couple of months' time if everything had gone well. So I think it will be a fairly light touch review of it. And I think on that, Councillor Raymond, absolutely. I do hope we can get our neighbouring councils to collaborate with us on housing the numbers, on building the number of homes that we have forecast we need. Thank you.
Thank you. We are asked to approve the withdrawal of the Oxford local plan and the statement which is attached. To note, on the other hand, the Cabinet decision to approve the local development scheme and to authorise the head of planning and regulatory services by delegated powers to make any necessary minor corrections. Can I see all those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Yes, thank you. We move on to officer reports. Item 9 is on urgent key decisions taken since our last meeting. This is just for noting, but Councillor Brown, did you have anything to say? Are there any further members? Councillor Gant.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I served had the honour of serving as the chair of the Scrutiny Committee of this council for, I think it was 5 years, might even have been 6. It's all a bit of a blur, to be honest. But during that period, I remember being asked to approve this process a handful of times, and there are 3 on the agenda of this very meeting. The Constitution is pretty clear about the reasons that sometimes it simply isn't practical for the normal procedures to be done for perfectly good timing reasons, and that was explained to me clearly by the officers on the occasions that I've referred to. But those processes are there for a reason. They're there to give proper oversight of decisions, including when they are confidential in nature, and I can't see on the face of it why any of these 3 decisions could not have been organised in such a way as to go through that process.
Thank you. Do we have a member of Cabinet? Councillor Brown.
Yes. So, I mean, in general, I concur, Councillor Gant. I think that we need to be very careful in using urgent key decisions so that they are genuinely urgent and key. And we have asked the monitoring officer to look at that, and in fact we have a report on the agenda of last Cabinet from the monitoring officer on this, and trying to make sure that we've got better processes in place to make sure this doesn't happen in future. I think it would be fair to say that some of these are, however, urgent and key decisions. When it comes to things like disposal of land, it is often going to be necessary to take them through a process such as this, because ultimately you have to take a decision within a certain time frame, which may not be easy to determine in advance. And the point is that we have a forward plan, and some things just won't be on the forward plan, and the whole process relies on decisions having been on the forward plan, so they can go to scrutiny and then through to Cabinet. So I think that explains some, but definitely not all, and I think we have got to tighten up our processes to make sure that all of our decisions are getting the proper scrutiny and the proper decision-making process, and we are as keen as you are to see that.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. I think it's a fair point. Just refreshing my memory of the decisions involved, I think all of them, certainly the 2 which I was closer to, had quite substantial discussion earlier in the process, including at scrutiny. I think what happened was then there was a decision needed to push the button, having previously, if memory serves, taken decisions at Cabinet informed by scrutiny. So I think, fortunately, these weren't things, if memory serves, that came completely out of the blue. But I think I do support what Councillor Brown says, and indeed what the monitoring officer put in her report. But and I think that's fair.
Thank you. Are there any? Yes, I see Councillor Smoten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Regarding the third decision, and I'll quote carefully from the public report, the one concerning the disposal of land that is currently in agricultural use and which is worth more than £500,000, and which has development potential. When does the council expect to fully inform councillors or the public of the nature, I don't mean the figures in pounds and pence, but the nature of their transaction there?
Councillor Miles.
Thank you. As Chair of Scrutiny, it was my role to review these decisions, and so I want to, for the record, just make it clear that I requested, in response to seeing a trend of the urgent key decisions, a report by officers as to why this was happening and a plan to look at addressing some of the potential capacity issues that have led to this trend. We discussed this at Scrutiny, and we will refer to these recommendations shortly when we do the report back on Scrutiny. But I'd just like to acknowledge that the Law and Governance team have worked very hard to address some of the trend, and we will discuss that shortly in the next future agenda item on this paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to reply to Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I'm afraid, Chris, I haven't got an answer for you right now, but I will undertake to get a written answer to you about a date on that or a time scale, whatever is appropriate. Yes, thank you, Councillor Miles. I know absolutely Scrutiny are on this too. I think, to be fair, it was a pretty much joint approach. I think officers, the monitoring officer, Cabinet and yourselves were all noticing a trend and all seeking to do something about it. So I think with our collective might behind us to try and address this, I hope we will. I think having said all of that, I think that you know, these things do still go through a process, as Councillor Turner has quite rightly said, and they are on the public agenda. There are it is still a transparent process. I have to say, I think when I first came on the council, a lot of these sorts of decisions were being taken in a very untransparent way and without any real scrutiny. So I think we have still got a more transparent process, but I would rather they were coming through Cabinet and Scrutiny.
Thank you. We are asked to note the report. So let us do that. Item 10 is the great joy of the Council and Committee meetings programme. Does anybody wish to introduce it? Susan?
I'd like to go through it in enormous detail. No, I wouldn't. I'd just like to formally propose it. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Smith?
I'll formally second it, Lord Mayor.
Of course. Thank you. Any more? Seeing nothing, we have to approve this, so all those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item 11 is the polling place review. Susan.
Yes, I should actually have thanked Jonathan and his team for all their work on the previous report, because I know it is a huge amount of work. So thank you. On this one, I would like to formally move the report.
Can I have a seconder, Councillor Jarvis? Does anybody else wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we have to approve the schedule of polling districts and polling places, Appendix 1. All those in favour? That is, again, unanimous, I believe. Thank you. We move to item 12, which is questions on Cabinet minutes. First of all, the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December. Do we have any questions? Councillor Smoten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A question regarding the HRA business plan. The report there describes selling around 100 dwellings over the course of 10 years to generate a capital receipt and improve the position of the HRA. Can we confirm, is that option being pursued? And if so, how does the number of new builds that it enables compare to the 100 lost units?
Councillor Smith.
No, it's not being actively pursued. It's there as a possibility, as one of the range of actions which can be taken to mitigate the position of the HRA if necessary.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is on the 86-point control parking zone and the sales spend. I want to check the legality first. Are we legally allowed to transfer that money from, which is supposed to be local community infrastructure levy, into the CPZ zones? It is basically a question on legality, because I think although it says in the end, when it says cabinet agreed to decision to the head of planning consultation, the cabinet member for planning, I don't think so. It's our job to give money to the county for these CPZ, because no disrespect politically, where Labour is opposing all these CPZ and then they're giving them the money.
Councillor Upton.
So that this was about reviewing existing CPZs to make them better, because there's often daft things in them, like the one around Headington still assumes that there's a football ground there. So we know that reviewing them in the past has been quite popular, because sometimes it's good for businesses if you can actually put in a couple of some spots where people can park for less than 2 hours for free or something like that. So reviewing existing ones is generally very popular and a good thing to do. This is not about paying for new ones at all.
Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So I'm confused as well, because clearly CPZs are not the responsibility of the City Council, although I am aware of that the earlier CPZs were part funded by the City Council, but I believe that the CPZ in question wasn't part funded, and it's not the responsibility of the City Council to be using money from SIL receipts to pay for a report. I don't think this is an appropriate use of funding, and I think it'd be used better else within the city for city residents.
Councillor Brown.
Well, I will ask the portfolio holder if she agrees with me that it is actually a very good thing to be able to use the money that we collect for infrastructure on behalf of the County Council as well as ourselves to review the transport infrastructure to make it better for local residents and local businesses, which is absolutely the case, particularly in my own ward, in Churchill Ward. People have been asking for this for years and years and years, and I'm really glad that we've been able to engage to try and get that reviewed.
Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So, Councillor Holmesworth questioned its legality in the paper anyway, so I assume we're still waiting for the legal answers on that. Given the care that the administration is taking over what might be improved, I know that the LTNs have been a disaster. Would you follow this up and maybe have a survey and a review of those as well? Because they have been an absolute nightmare for all of us, and previously all we've had is nothing to do with us. So if SIL money is legally used for this, would you commit to using SIL money to see the benefits or otherwise of the LTNs and the traffic filters? Because I think that would help everybody in the city.
Who is going to answer the question? Do I have a volunteer? Councillor Upton.
So CPZs very much are within something that the City Council has in the past said can be used to support our ambitions in the city, like being able to insist on car-free developments in some of our planning applications that need to have a CPZ around it in order for that to be possible. So I think reviewing CPZs is something that happens quite often, and it is a useful thing to do. LTNs, those really aren't our policy. Those are for the county council. So I'm sorry. No, I'm certainly not going to commit here and now to putting money into reviewing that. There's no formal process to do that. It's completely different from CPZs.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you. With reference to the CPZ review, why is the North Oxford CPZ not being included as part of the review? Not least because a significant portion of the silt is actually coming from the UNIV development in that area, in that CPZ. And there's been a significant impact on that area from the development itself, from contractor traffic, and we all share a passion, I think, across the chamber of addressing the school-related traffic in North Oxford, and including them within the CPZ review would potentially go some way to addressing that. So I call on you for looking at that and including them, but ask you why they're not included if you're choosing not to. Thank you.
Councillor Upton?
I believe that we've chosen the 7 that the county put forward to us. So you might want to go and ask your county colleagues whether they would like to put that one forward to be reviewed. But we haven't been asked to look at that one, and I believe the 7 we were given were the 7 that were prioritised by the county council for us to be done.
Thank you. We now move to the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of January, only 5 days ago. Are there any questions on these minutes? Councillor Smoten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Question on the fleet item. Are we convinced that the issue raised there of contracts that are being issued in breach of the local government regulations is limited to fleet purchases? Was there money lost due to the contract being terminated, and was service impacted due to the contract needing to be terminated?
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very helpful report. I have no reason to believe it's not an isolated incident, and we put in place training and development for staff to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I'm not aware that it will cost us any money. The contract has been null and voided because obviously it wasn't approved in a proper way. We'll go out to the market. We'll see how we do. It could cost us more, the delay. I wouldn't rule it out, but I couldn't tell you at the moment. And the third question?
Was there an impact on service due to needing to cancel the contract and do it over?
No, no. I mean, there is enough leeway to work the existing fleets for the rest of this year. Obviously, we'd have liked to have taken receipt of the new vehicles in February and March. I suspect it will be in the autumn, but ODS assured me that they can carry out their duties without a problem because of that delay.
Thank you. Any more for any more? Seeing none, thank you. Item 13 is questions on notice from members of council. Beginning with questions to the leader, SB1, Councillor Smoten. Do you have a supplementary?
Me again, Lord Mayor. Yes, I note that when Swindon introduced community councils, that was the outcome of a strategic whole authority approach rather than asking for piecemeal submissions area by area. Would you agree that taking a uniform approach, we could ensure all areas, not just those with the most politically engaged residents, gain equal benefit?
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I think it's something for us to consider when we are considering our proposals for a unitary Oxford. I think it is something that we would want to look at. However, I also note that last time residents were consulted on a potential new parish, they were not overwhelmingly in support of it. In fact, they were so marginally divided over it that we were unable to agree it going forward. So, and that was also on an extremely low turnout poll. Again, not showing huge excitement about the prospect. So I think it is something we want to consider, and there are some opportunities, I think, to do that as part of the process.
Question SB2, Councillor Sandelson. Do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Question SB3. Thank you. Councillor Gant, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. My question was about an account that Councillor Brown gave of a statement by the County Council. And I think it's quite telling that in reply, Councillor Brown did not quote what the County Council said, but what somebody else said about what the County Council had said. In fact, the County Council letter says, we have made it very clear that our preference is to hold elections in May 2025. Who does Councillor Brown think is best placed to speak for the Leader of the County Council? Councillor Leffman or herself?
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Well, it seems that neither Councillor Leffman nor Councillor Gant understand the purpose of their letter, because as I explained to the County Cabinet, there was no need to send that letter at all if they were not seeking to prevent the elections from taking place. That is the sole purpose for the letter, which is why their council ended up on a list of councils seeking to postpone elections. So absolutely, I stand by my statement. The County Council were seeking to postpone elections, and I'm very sorry that that's not been properly understood by the County Cabinet.
SB4, Councillor Gant, do you have a supplementary?
Yes. It is clear that there is at least one person who doesn't understand the content of the recent exchange of letters, and it's the leader of this council. But you know, all I can do is repeat the question that I put here. Is this the right time to talk about reorganisation, given that that is what Councillor Brown has done, or not?
Councillor Brown.
I'll try and explain again so that hopefully I can help explain to Councillor Gant. The purpose of the letter that the County Cabinet sent was to put local government reorganisation ahead of any devolution decisions that were made. That was completely contrary to the agreement of all of the district and county leaders had just earlier that week, and had said many times previously that we all wanted to sort out our devolution boundaries before we decided on local government reorganisation. It was also ahead of any discussions having taken place on local government reorganisation. So, to say the least, it was premature for us to be having a bid go in from the County Council to put forward an early approach on local government reorganisation ahead of devolution, which is what the letter was proposing. I completely understand why they did it, because clearly the County Council is very keen to put in a unitary county bid, and this was their way of doing that. But equally clearly, I am not going to support it, and I am not going to support it in the face of the county going ahead against the wishes of all of the other councils in Oxfordshire to do devolution first.
SB5, Councillor Gant, do you have a supplementary?
Well, I'll have another go. Yes, I mean, Councillor Brown has favoured us with her explanation of the motives and statements of many other organisations around the county. And I would just point out that the County Council's letter was put through an emergency cabinet meeting so that it was done in public, and it was supported by every other council leader in the county who attended in person, and by the leaders of every group on the county council, including the Labour group. In relation to SB5, her response appears to confirm that she had not indeed spoken to representatives of areas around Oxford before announcing her plan to include them in her own proposal by saying that that will happen. Wouldn't it have been better if it had happened first?
Councillor Brown.
As I said in my answer to the previous question, there have been no discussions as yet on local government reorganisation. But just as the County Council has been talking about its proposals for a unitary county, just as South and Vale have been talking about their proposals or their ambitions to have a joint unitary with each other and with West Berkshire, I have set out the ambitions of this council to be a unitary Oxford. And I think that those are obviously proposals we will then all need to talk about together. As I said in answer to my previous question, it was, however, premature to considering those different proposals to suggest that we could be on some kind of fast track for local government reorganisation when we haven't had those formal talks at all yet.
SB6, Councillor Yatesman, do you have a supplementary?
the Home Secretary has announced plans for 5 government-backed local inquiries. I'm only aware of 1 location so far being confirmed. Will this council, alongside our county colleagues, be seeking to be part of the local inquiries?
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Yateman. I think ultimately this will probably be a decision for the county council, but should they wish to put Oxfordshire forward for consideration as part of one of those reviews, I'm sure we would be supportive of that decision. I don't think it is for us to do because they are the lead authority on safeguarding.
SB7, Councillor Muddyman, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your answer. I regret that the council's not able to take legal action against Network Rail on behalf of local businesses, and not even surprisingly, on behalf of our residents. Given the lengthy delay to the reopening of Botley Road announced last week, will the leader of the council consider taking legal action against Network Rail in its own right, the council's right?
As I have indicated, that isn't something that we could do. I don't see that there's a difference between your proposal. I'm not sure what... sorry, I don't understand the difference between your supplementary and your question.
SB8, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Brown for her response here, and I'd like to also put on the record that I very much hope we get to the motion introduced by Councillor Brown and Councillor Elton, with which I mostly agree. It is good to hear that she shares my view that Oxford unitary would be the best way forward. In that spirit, I wanted to ask what capacity there would be for cross-party working in putting forward the views of this city, because as she will know, the consultation with local government is at a tier 1 level, so all we have is soft power. So what capacity is there for cross-party working and ensuring this city is properly represented?
Thank you,
Councillor Brown.
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Powell. I am keen to do cross-party working. I want there to be a cross-party approach from this city as part of our proposals when we go forward. And I will be looking to further engage with the opposition groups on our proposals.
SB9, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
SB10, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. I thank you again, Councillor Brown, for your sharing my view of the importance of lived experience. As you will know, in the 2021 census, Oxford recorded a particularly high population of queer, gender, diverse and trans residents. Given this, does she share my view that there's a particular importance that people speak with caution and always in a way that recognises the essential humanity of people and in particular doesn't treat real lives as a subject merely for debate?
Yes.
Mr. Brown. Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I think I spoke over you, Lord Mayor. I just said yes.
Sorry, we now turn to questions from the Cabinet Member for Finance. ET1, Councillor Coyne. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, thank you, Lord Mayor, but thank you for your answer, Councillor.
Thank you. ET2, Councillor Miles. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. So the cost of flooding in November was estimated to be 30k based on your response. And given the increased pressures on the reserves of this council to address the loss and damage of flooding, do you think there's sufficient reserves set aside for future unpredictable incidents of flooding? And have you explored other financing approaches for this loss and damage? Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Oh, 3 interesting things in there. On the level of reserves, we're advised by our ever-wise Section 151 officer. Oh, he's given me a little smile there. He heard that. And a little wink as well. There we go. It's getting better and better. So on the adequacy of reserves, and we'll get that in his 151 officer report. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable, to be honest, not least because I think we've got specific risks. We've also got general risks, and to be honest, we can move different reserves around if we need to. So, again, there's reserves, for example, about future level of business rates, which are very substantial. But if needs be, you could deploy some of that for flooding. You sort of hope not everything goes wrong at once. And our level of reserves is okay, is relatively healthy. In terms of alternatives, I think at one point the councillor raised a question about the type of insurance we have, and unfortunately, I think that the type of product that she had in mind wouldn't have been cost effective. Clearly, one thing we do is when we get different flooding events, we look carefully at whether the government's going to reimburse us. It should really, because the flooding is something which is beyond our local control. It should be, to my mind, a risk which is held nationally. And so, given any opportunity, we'd make the case to government. But sometimes you get somewhere, it tends to be quite big before that kicks in, to be honest. Any other ideas about how we might get money to cover this, do take them up with me.
ET3, Councillor Smoten, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Will this council be explicit with ministers that whatever reorganisation takes place, past experience suggests that short-term difficulty that induces is neither quick nor cheap, and an injection of funds to make a success of any reorganisation will be a necessity?
Councillor Turner.
The councillor makes a very good point, and I completely agree with him. And it does concern me. So the text of the white paper talks about some research on this, but it was commissioned by the County Councils Network, which isn't where I'd look for neutral research into this question. If the council is interested in quite a critical perspective on this, Colin Copus and Steve Leach have just had something up in the Local Government Chronicle, which is well worth a read. And it does concern me that there might be people, officials, saying, well, there's all this money to be saved, so you could say you're giving local government extra money, but it's doing so instead by savings, and the assumptions there would be very, very optimistic. So I think I agree with the premise of the question, and I think the councillor would judge from the tone of my comments, but in answering it, and maybe other things that will certainly be very candid with anyone willing to listen.
ET4, were there even that many ET films? Anyway, Councillor Smoten, do you have a supplementary?
To your question, Lord Mayor, I don't know. I've only seen one. Was there a two? And to the question, the follow-up to the question that I asked of Councillor Turner, indications from other councils suggest that government has failed to fully cover the costs of an NI increase. Are we in a position at this point to say if it has failed to do so for Oxford?
Councillor Turner.
I thought you were going to tell me to go home, by the way, Lord Mayor. That's what, isn't it? ET go home. That's what it's all about. And I wouldn't mind, to be honest, but I'll stick it out. It's not looking good. So I'm not aware of the final allocations, and I don't think we have got them yet, but they haven't allocated enough money. So, it might be that the formula plays out in a different way and we'll get the full cost. That would be a very lovely thing, but I think it's much more likely, based on our calculations about the way the formula will play out. As I said in this answer, this is not being fully funded, and that's really regrettable. And, obviously I have some sympathy with a government which inherited a budget shambles, right? That it is what it is. The fiscal position that it inherited is awful, and I think the black hole, the unfunded projects, the stuff which looked like a policy commitment hadn't been paid for, all the rest of it, that is real, and the pressure there was terrible. I suppose my advice to ministers and civil servants is, when you put out words of reassurance, don't overpromise. The last government overpromised on COVID. It said, "Well, stand by. You'll be seen." We're 16 million quid down. Yeah, I mean, they didn't keep their word on that. If they'd said, "We have been hit by something which is so big, you may well have to erode your reserves, and we won't fund it," that would have managed expectations better. Now, on the NI increase here, to be honest, if they'd said, all of the public sector is going to be hit by this, and it's going to be really difficult, but we think it's the right thing to do, and we've made some headline pledges about not, for example, raising income tax, and we've got the mandate to do that, and we've inherited a dreadful fiscal position, so we will help, but we can't do it all. I think that would have been a better press release. I think if you oversell what you're going to do, then it can lead to disappointment. We will be able to cover it off in a budget. We'll show you how we will cover it off, but yeah, the assessment is that it's not going to be sufficient, sadly.
Thank you. From memory, I think the line is ET phone home, and that reminds me to remind members, if they have any mobile devices, please make sure that they're turned on silent. ET5, Councillor Raymond, do you have a supplementary?
No.
And ET6, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. We move to Cabinet Member for Zero Carbon Oxford, AR1, Councillor Miles. Do you have a supplementary? No. AR2, Councillor Miles, supplementary. AR3, Councillor Raymond, supplementary.
No, Lord Mayor.
And AR4, no supplementary?
Yes, Lord
Yes.
Mayor. Yeah. With the judicial review going on at the moment, if the bridge was to go ahead, I understand that trees would be replaced. What happens if there is no bridge? Will those trees, do you give a commitment to get those trees back that we culled or we took away before the planning application was determined, and in future, can we resist the temptation to do such things, please?
Councillor Railton.
Thank you very much. So yes, we made that commitment to replant regardless of, well, certainly back then, the planning decision. So yes, I guess the answer is yes.
AL5, Councillor Morris, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, very briefly, just to say thank you, Councillor Relton, for the response. And I hope that you appreciate that I may keep asking as we await for further information, and just pleased that you could include Councillor Kerr and myself in any response that you receive from the Transport Minister and plans going forward wherever you think that's relevant.
Councillor Railton.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I will do that.
Cabinet Member for Safer Oxford, LA.
Please. Yes, please, Lord Mayor. So thank you, Councillor Alshad, for your response here. I appreciate your raising it with the Highways Authority. However, as you will know, it is not just an issue here of raising it with the Highways Authority. The legal situation around pavement parking is somewhat complex. I wonder if you would therefore also undertake to write to Annalise Dodds as MP for Oxford East and encourage her to ask that the government take action so that proper powers are given for local authorities to tackle pavement parking. As I'm sure many of us have seen in our wards, this is a significant issue of antisocial behaviour that takes place in our city, and it is something where local government really needs more powers in order to address it.
Thank you. Yeah,
Councillor Alshad.
sorry, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to do that. Thank you.
Questions to Cabinet Member for a Healthy Oxford, CM1, Councillor Smoten. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Cabinet Member for Housing and Communities, LS1, Councillor Miles. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I just wondered whether the Cabinet Member could elaborate whether there is any feasibility to collect information on who is the ultimate owner of the properties that are being licensed under either the selective or HMO licensing schemes. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
It's something I'm happy to explore with officers as we look to renew the scheme.
LS2, Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary? No, thank you. LS3, Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary? LS4, Councillor Raymond, do you have a supplementary?
No, Lord Mayor, I think No, I don't. Leave it at that. There's no 5. 6 is mine. No.
Which our officers have helpfully renumbered 5, but I apologise, it's down in the agenda of 6. Do you have a supplementary?
No for 6.
Thank you. LS7 or 6. Councillor M, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I was just trying to clarify something. I didn't misunderstand it. I think the point was, second question would be that in the business plan, there's said that 10 properties per year will be disposed of, or up to 100. They may be disposed of. So if they are, that's within the budget. And if not, how would you balance the budget then for the properties that you anticipate that you would sell off or dispose of?
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I mean, it's there as a range of mitigations to make the budget balance in future. See, we don't want to be holding properties. We can't hold properties and let them at social rent and have them losing money. You know, did you vote against the rent rises earlier? You abstained. I mean, you heard we're only charging an average of just over £133 a week rent. So, you know, if properties are expensive to maintain or need, you know, a huge amount of investment to bring up to the standard that we would want for our tenants, then it's not viable for us to hold them as social rent. And there might be cases where it's better to dispose of them, hand them over to a private landlord who, with the rent levels that they have coming in, might be able to make it work for them, and for us to invest in property which does work for social rent, for affordable rent, which is our priority.
LS8, Councillor Rennan, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Lord Mayor, thank you. Thank you for the answer to the last one. So on that basis, we're purchasing properties at Barton Park, 186, I think, for 300-something million pounds. How does the councillor justify that compared to properties that are £133 per week, and when we're paying, like I said, over on average, I lost the figure now, about £500,000 per property? How would we balance the budget on that in Barton Park?
Councillor Smith.
So I'm not sure what question we're on, but I'll have a go at answering it anyway. I mean, any sort of development or acquisition involves a business plan being put forward. And, you know, a decision was taken about those acquisitions at Barton Park, which makes them stack up in the long term. And as a council, we're able to plan for the long term. So in that case, you know, it adds up, and we are able to make them pay for themselves over a long period of time. I mean, it might be 40 years, it might be 50 years. But, you know, every acquisition needs to be looked at, and the same as any property that is flagged up through our survey work as needing massive investment to make it, to bring it up to standard, then we'll have to look at the business case there as well on an individual basis.
LS9, Councillor Rule, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Lord. Thank you.
Thank you. Cabinet questions to the Cabinet Member for Planning, LU1. Councillor Goddard, do you have a supplementary?
In your answer, Councillor Upton, you refer to reaching out to neighbourhood forums to alert them to the issue, which is correct and is indeed what happened. My observation during the process, and it was rather stressful and extremely inconvenient for a number of local bodies, was that the neighbourhood forum ended up acting as a kind of lightning conductor, with upset people getting in touch with neighbourhood forum officers, where they could rather more usefully have been talking directly to the council. So will one of the changes made in the internal processes that you refer to be to make it possible, as it were, to bypass neighbourhood forums and actually allow local bodies to follow up this sort of problem if it happens again? With a bit of luck it won't, but if it happens again, more directly with the council.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you. That sounds like a sensible idea. I will talk it over with the head of planning. Thank you.
LU2, Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary? No, thank you. LU3, Councillor Miles, supplementary? LU4, Councillor Rennan, supplementary? No. Thank you. LU5, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary? No. And last but not least, LU6, Councillor Robertson. Robinson, my apologies. Do you have a supplementary? Thank you. That concludes the questions on notice. We have about 10 minutes before we break, so we may be able to get through one of the outside organisation reports. The first on the agenda is the Oxlap and Skills Board, which is for noting. Councillor Brown, would you like to introduce?
No, it's Councillor Hollingsworth, sorry.
My apologies, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was all geared up for a post-break launch. The report's here largely for noting and for questions. This is an organisation that's in a process of very significant reorganisation, so hence this slight delay in bringing forward this report. Normally we'd have an annual report. The last one was in March of 2023. We were proposing to bring one earlier than this, but obviously the reorganisation, the key element of the reorganisation is, like most LEPs around the country, the LEP is now moving to become a part of the upper tier authority, in this case Oxfordshire County Council. That process has taken a little bit of time, as you would expect, a complicated thing, but it will complete by the end of March of this year. So I think transition started March last year and the process of change. So it's there mostly to update people on the process. I'm more than happy to field any questions on the work of the LEP as it ceased to exist.
Are there any questions? Councillor Miles.
I'm not sure whether it's exactly a question or a comment, but there seems to be no disaggregated data included within this, and diversity is really important when we talk about economic empowerment of different groups, and diversity is really important to us as a city council. So I know that we, as representatives to FOP Scrutiny in the past, have raised this issue of gathering and reporting on this, the disaggregated data, and it just doesn't seem to have been taken up by Oxlap. So I do hope that going forward, when we're looking at economic participation rates and apprenticeships and data such as that, then that data is disaggregated based on relevant characteristics, whether that's males or females or other gender information, or by ethnicity, where there's underrepresentation of certain groups in the areas of the economy that we're trying to boost within Oxfordshire. And I wonder whether you've got any insights on that, but if not, if we can re-emphasise the point going forward that we need that data to inform action. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
I think that's a fair comment. I mean, like most LEPs, Oxfordshire LEP focused on other things, didn't see that as an enormously high priority. And I think that is something where we can reflect and pass that comment. I'm not quite sure whether I will be the official process or whether it be through officers or through the leader. As we heard earlier in the questions, the leader of the county council and the leader of the city council seem to be meeting on an hourly basis to discuss things. Maybe not this, but maybe they'd like a break from talking about local government reorganisation. But I think it is important, and I'm reflecting back a couple of years to the work that was being done to develop the Oxfordshire 2050 plan, to which the LEP contributed. Some of the most interesting feedback that came from that was some of the feedback from younger people from across the county as a whole, so people living in villages and towns and so on, and how they weren't part of the process of discussion about planning, development, but also this economic development. And I think that's something we need to reflect on, need to think about going forwards, and I'm sure Oxfordshire as a body with its education links will do that and do that well, and these issues of diversity also. But yeah, a fair comment with which I agree.
Anything further on this report? No, so we note the report, and we may even just have time for the thrill of the Waste and Resources Partnership. Councillor Chapman, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm happy to take questions. It's a full report about the activities in the year 23-4. A lot of very good work, and it's a very good example of how we can work well with the officers and politicians from across the county.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I think the Scrutiny Committee deserves a little longer than 3 minutes, so we will break now and return at... Sorry. Sorry, did you... Oh, okay, excellent. If you are volunteering to cover the Scrutiny report in 3 minutes, please do.
Thank you. Well, the reporting period was actually from the 1st of October to the 14th of January. And I'd like to thank Jonathan, Celeste and the team for all the support since the last meetings. We met 5 times during that period, and there were 5 panel meetings, 32 recommendations to Cabinet, of which the Cabinet and the shareholder joint venture group, they agreed 26 fully, 4 partially and 5 were rejected. What I'd just like to draw attention to was the point raised around the urgent decisions. And 2 recommendations were accepted on this. And the first was that Cabinet supports the continued implementation and embedding of the actions proposed to mitigate the increased number of urgent key decisions taken. So that's good news that that recommendation was accepted. And the second one, that officers ensure an end-of-year report is submitted to Scrutiny Committee reporting the number and nature of urgent key decisions taken, including data to track trends and evaluate distinctions between capacity-related and unavoidable issues. So given that we will be having the final Scrutiny meeting of the year, I think just after Ramadan, it's not on Ramadan, it's been rescheduled so it doesn't clash with that, then before the end of the year this will be reported on. The other thing that I just wanted to raise was the last Scrutiny meeting we discussed flood management, because this is an increasing issue for many of us in the city because of the flood risk. 3 of the recommendations were put forward, and 2 were partially accepted and 1 was accepted related to that. But I would really just draw your attention, everyone, to look at the presentation from that, because it contains very useful information. I think that probably covers everything. You've got all the reports available, and I won't go through every individual recommendation, but thank you to officers for all their hard work on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Are there any questions on the Scrutiny Committee update report? Seeing none, thank you, Catherine, for your excellent work in chairing the committee, and we will now break and return at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please be seated. Game of musical chairs. Right, we moved on to item 14, which is public addresses and questions. We have 2, and I believe the first is Mr. LeVay. Is that correct?
Can I sit? Is that possible?
Welcome. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. In November 2021, I sat here when Network Rail boasted that they had closed Botley Road for only 4 days. The reality, for 20 months, we in West Oxford have been cut off from our own city by the monstrous incompetence of Network Rail. On Friday, we had the appalling news that this will continue for at least 1,300 days. In desperation, we put together graphic statements by 32 local people saying just how badly they'd been affected, and we published it as Network Hell. I sent you each a copy. I hope you'll look at it. Those suffering are firstly the elderly and infirm who can't manage the ghastly, scary pedestrian tunnel under the rail bridge narrow, overcrowded, uneven, full of motorbikes. These people, many hundreds, were suddenly cut off from much of their lives, even their GPs and hospitals. Secondly, small businesses suddenly cut off from most of their customers. They are family businesses, so families suffer. They are failing, closing, leaving Oxford. I estimate the economic damage to our community so far as about £20 million and 100 jobs. But thirdly, the whole of Oxford suffers. The bus company reports the combination of closure of Botley Road and LTNs has increased journey times by 15 to 20%, greatly increasing air pollution and damaging the economy. But I want to talk about another loss of faith in our public institutions. For 2 years in West Oxford, we have suffered exclusion from our own city, unbearable intrusion of works and traffic, and uncertainty from one week to another, as Network Rail constantly miss their own deadlines. And no one has listened to us, no one has cared what is happening to us, not Network Rail, Kier, Thames Water, British Gas, the government, the County Council, or, I have to say, this council. No difference whether privatised, nationalised or elected, all keen to look the other way and get on with other things. The only official contact from your council was a guy who came to make quite sure that our small businesses knew you would not help them. You may say your functions as a council are not involved, certainly not to the extent of the County Council, which we regard as deeply culpable. But you have some involvement. You authorise night working through Section 61 agreements. We asked you to consult us about them, you did not. We asked for copies of them, we haven't had them. One of my neighbours, a 90-year-old woman, last year lay awake night after night, sleepless in her kitchen, because the smashing noise of piling work within 40 metres of her bedroom was quite unendurable. It was torture. You authorised it. But the issue is wider than that. Democracy is in a bad way. In America, it may not survive. The Tory party has been ripped up. Labour is in power, but extraordinarily unpopular. Scary fringe passes are on the rise. A recent poll showed that 1 in 5 young people don't think much of democracy. And thinking of our experience, why should they? We've been suffering for 2 years something like occupation by entities that are incompetent and arrogant and completely unaccountable, yet we were not heard. You trumpet great plans for Westgate or Oxford North, which seem to us who live in West Oxford to have nothing to do with us, not to benefit us. We've had no real say in them. Few voters understand the difference between county and city councils. Nobody understands how you're funded. Planning is carried out in an occult language, and the one thing it always excludes is what local people actually want. Now we hear Oxford may be abolished and wrapped up in a bigger authority after hard bargaining between politicians. The only people not to have a voice in that are the people. I tell you, this City Hall sometimes feels as remote as Westminster or Brussels. So I think our experience is a challenge to you, each of you. As our small businesses go under and our disabled and infirm live lives suddenly isolated, I ask you whether it is really acceptable that you do nothing in this, our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a response? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for your address, Mr LeBay, and also for the publication that you sent us, which I certainly have read, and I'm sure many other people have too. I too express my clear and bitter disappointment to Network Rail on behalf of residents and businesses in West Oxford and Botley who've been so severely impacted by the works. As we all know, the works have taken too long already, and the further long extension is extremely unwelcome news. A number of us were sceptical about the dates as soon as we knew that they depended on Thames Water's engagement. I would take issue with your description of City Council involvement. We have on a number of occasions offered support which was taken up by a number of local businesses to support them in a practical way with promotion, and we have done that. And we have written in addition to ask for support for business rate relief on more than one occasion. And I also know that both of your city councillors have made strong representation on behalf of local residents and businesses to Network Rail and to the Rail Minister and to the County Council, as have I. Last year, I asked for the Minister's active involvement, and I'm pleased to see that Lord Hendy's intervention has at least provided clarity over a final end date, and, very importantly, a commitment to improvements in access to the west of the station, better stewarding of the pedestrian tunnel, which we had requested, as well as the completion of the new improved pedestrian walkway by the summer, which should make for an improved pedestrian experience. We mustn't lose sight of the purpose of all this, which is the redevelopment of Oxford Station, and that will bring real long-term benefits to the city. Without it, proposals to reopen the Cowley branch line to passengers or increase the capacity on east-west rail services would not be feasible. However, I am only too aware that this is a very cold comfort to the many residents and businesses who've been so badly impacted by the road closure. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a second public speaker, Mr. Lewis. Welcome. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Tom Lewis, a member of the Stop Botley West group of volunteers who are all in favour of renewable energy but critical of the unjustifiably large and damaging proposal to build Botley West solar farm. I live in Church Hamborough, one of the 15 villages that will be affected by the project. Just a few facts. If it is built, the solar farm would stretch from Wootton to Botley and Hamborough to Kidlington, 11 miles in length. It will be the largest solar farm in Europe on an area the size of Heathrow Airport and adversely affecting 11,000 homes within 1.5 kilometres of the site. 75% of the solar farm is to be constructed on Oxford's Greenbelt, which is described by local authorities as functioning well. 36% of the 1,400 hectares is on best and most versatile agricultural land, growing national average yields of cereals. This land will be lost to food production for the 42-year life of the project. It will involve installing 2.2 million solar panels, ancillary equipment, and at least 30 kilometres of cable runs, tall fences, lights and cameras. It will cross the Thames at Ensham and connect to a new substation near Farmore before the electricity generated during daylight hours is uploaded to the national grid network and within seconds used throughout the UK, not just Oxfordshire. The development is a nationally significant infrastructure project, and the planning process is handled by the Planning Inspectorate, PINS, who send their recommendation to the Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero for final review. No decision is likely before the middle of 2026. Surveys by both Stop Botley West Group and the developers themselves find that overwhelmingly residents oppose this project. Oxford City Council themselves have made a clear statement that the DCO application will need to provide a strong and robust case for the development of this scale, particularly where it will need to demonstrate exceptional circumstances to justify development within the Green Belt, justify impacts on the setting of a number of heritage assets, including Blenheim Palace. The developer has ignored this advice. The non-technical summary of the environmental statement states there are no significant adverse effects, either temporary or permanent, on the local landscape character arising from construction and operation of the project. This is patently untrue. Given the size and scale of Botley West and its location on hills visible for miles and the valley slopes of the rivers Glyme, Evenlode and Charwell, it's simply inconceivable that the impacts of such a scheme on residents and on the visitor experience can be anything other than significantly adverse. and will cause lasting damage to the openness of the landscape and the spatial integrity due to its unprecedented scale. Nearly all of the land is controlled by Blenheim, and the setting of Blenheim Palace, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was cited in their 2017 management plan as being important to the landscape and to the surrounding historic villages. This too has been ignored. Pluvial flooding is already a serious issue, particularly for the villages of Cassington, Wharton, Yarnton and Kidlington. The developers have consistently ignored peer-reviewed scientific evidence that solar panels increase runoff. Too many papers. Water flowing off the area ends up in the River Thames, increasing the risk of flooding downstream, and Oxford City is downstream. The Stop Botley West Group would like to ask City Councillors to address the following 4 questions. Number 1, are the Council not concerned that the developer in the DCO has ignored the City Council's request and provided no justification for the development, which would have a significant adverse impact on the city's greenbelt and public rights-of-way throughout the area, and that the proposed mitigation is inadequate? Number 2, will the Council ask for more detail on why alternatives to the current scheme have not been investigated? And 3, have the Council explored the full implications of an increase in the risk of flooding associated with Botley West and its impact both on the city and the surrounding villages? And finally, are the Council not concerned about the project's impacts on the surroundings of Blenheim Palace, particularly as all the land involved in the scheme is to be the subject of a compulsory purchase order, and its future would then not be under Blenheim's stewardship during and after decommissioning in 42 years' time? At this pre-examination stage, the City Council has a chance now to submit what's called a relevant representation to PINS, raising what are significant concerns for the city and the surrounding area, and I would urge you to do so before the deadline of the 27th of February 2025. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do we have a response? Mr. Railton.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Lewis, for taking the time to address the Chamber this evening, and I'm pleased that you two are all in favour of renewable energy. This country is desperately in need of more green energy solutions to limit and eventually remove our reliance on fossil fuels. Whilst there are inevitably impacts resulting from major applications for solar farms, wind farms and other green energy applications, this must always be balanced with the ever more pressing climate emergency and the necessity for immediate action. The application for Botley West Solar Farm sits entirely outside of our boundary. This means we are a neighbouring authority and not a host authority, and are so not engaged with the level of challenge and oversight of the application that you seek. For example, your concerns regarding the potential flooding issues in villages in Oxfordshire should be raised by the relevant local planning authority if there is merit in those arguments. It's also worth clarifying that the green belt that surrounds Oxford is not controlled by the city but is in the hands of our neighbouring councils. They are therefore the relevant councils to protect it or indeed to allow much needed development on it. I, along with many other councillors in this chamber, would not describe the Greenbelt as functioning well. The Greenbelt was always meant to be regularly reviewed and not to strangle necessary housing growth as it does currently. I'd also like to point out that the upstream grid connections built with this project would be of great benefit to this city. In specific response to your questions, for 1 and 2, the purpose of our comment regarding Greenbelt was to ensure that the issue was raised and considered. As a neighbouring authority with no Greenbelt proposed for development, we will review details relevant to the city and submit comment where we believe there is sufficient reason for the Planning Inspectorate to take it into consideration. Something like the setting of a listed building in another council's area is not something that the council intend to comment upon. For question 3, as the council is not the host authority, it would not be appropriate for us to seek alternative locations. We need both rooftop and ground-mounted solar to be able to reach our net zero targets. For question 4, as mentioned earlier, the host authorities, and in this case the Environment Agency, are the relevant bodies to assess flooding. I couldn't find the peer-reviewed evidence about runoff from PV that was not easily mitigated. We will be submitting a representation to the Planning Inspectorate on this application, but not to object to this scheme. Thank you.
That concludes item 14. Thank you very much. We move on to, having dealt with all of item 15, A, B and C, we move on to item 16, motions on notice. The first motion is proposed by Councillor Henwood. Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you for the opportunity for the IOA's first motion at this full council. I'd like to remind members that this motion has an underpinning message. It's about democracy and transparency, building trust within the local community and excuse me. So what I'm going to do is not read through the whole motion, but just go through the aims of the motion, and then I'll surrender the motion to the floor. So this council believes it would be useful for Oxford City Council to publish the non-statutory supplement to its already published 2023 Air Quality Annual Status Report. This supplement would help provide the public with the council's baseline analysis of nitrogen dioxide pollution levels in the planned ZEZ expansion zone, reusing existing data. The reason why 2023 is important, because it gives us a baseline data figures prior to the introduction of electric buses, which comes in 2024. We would like to compare the two. Further, this council believes that the subsequent AQA RS should also include an in-depth analysis of nitrogen dioxide pollution levels in the planned Z expansion zone. And finally, collectively, these analyses would assist the City Council in deciding whether, in the Council's view, the Z expansion remains objectively justified as a policy that the City Council should continue to endorse. And that, Lord Mayor, I'd like to surrender the motion to Council to debate the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yatesman, seconded. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve, please.
Thank you. We have no amendments, so this is nice and simple. Any points? I see Councillor Smoten, Councillor Rayton, Councillor Fairweather, and Councillor Malik.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Councillors, I urge you to reject this motion. This is an attempted gotcha achieved by fixating extremely narrowly on one specific metric, that of NO2, which is then entirely wrongly extrapolated to dismiss an entire programme. The motion ignores that any level of NO2 pollution is hazardous to health. It ignores that NO2 is far from the only pollutant associated with motor vehicles. It ignores plain old carbon dioxide emissions completely. Most seriously, it ignores that fostering continued domination of our roads by motor vehicles is completely incompatible with a fast, reliable, efficient bus network, and we need one of those. It is also incompatible with a cycling city, not just in name, but in fact, assuming that one wishes to arrive at one's destination in one piece. There is plenty of room for debate about precisely how, where, and when that transformation of our travel should happen, and we should have those discussions in detail as the outlined ZEZ policy evolves towards reality. But this motion offers no plan whatsoever. This is just a shrug, an implicit acceptance that not just pollution, but crawling buses, as well as deaths and serious injuries of drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians are here to stay. For a city like Oxford that looks to the future, that isn't good enough. Councillors, please oppose this motion.
Councillor Railton.
Right, so Air Quality Annual Status Report. Firstly, we need to clear up what this report actually is. We as a District Council have a statutory obligation to report air quality measures to DEFRA once a year. This is that report, and this document needs to obey specific templates provided by DEFRA. The main purpose of this document is to, 1, report on air quality levels measured, and 2, draw some considerations on the impacts of schemes that have already been delivered. It is not a futurology exercise. Trying to predict the effects of future schemes is not part of its scope. That's it, you know, all of this stuff about a non-statutory appendices to old reports. You know, this report has been published for 7 months already. It's signed off by DEFRA, like it's done. So that aside, I think we want to be honest with everybody here about the objective. You know, what you really want is a report that shows that city centre nitrous oxide pollution is less than 30 micrograms per cubic metre, thus safe, thus no ZEZ required, job done. The sort of not enough air pollution argument. This is a good opportunity to talk about safe levels of NO2 pollution here, as my learned husband has done already. Our deliberately ambitious local annual mean target of 30 micrograms per cubic metre is still 3 times higher than the current safest annual mean limit established by the WHO of 10, and 150% higher than the new EU target of 20 by 2030. So, you know, 30 is better than 40, which is the UK legal limit, but it's not really that good. The idea that 30 micrograms per cubic metre is some magical threshold is just not true. You know, it was set out in the Air Quality Action Plan in 2019 because it's better than the national target and it's also achievable, and I think we will actually achieve it. It's a bit like a living wage, right? Like, it's better than the minimum wage, it's achievable, but nobody's saying that people shouldn't be paid more than that. When it comes to interaction with the county on this, your last sentence about decisions about revenue and stuff, like, that decision has already been made unilaterally by the county. The city is no longer a partner in the ZEZ expansion. It is a stakeholder like everybody else, and the county is delivering it alone. The city will get no revenue from the expansion, but if it goes ahead, we'll be lobbying hard for that revenue to be spent in the city, not as a county highway slush fund. County has already commissioned an air quality study for this, not from us, on the possible impacts of the ZEZ expansion. So that is the document that should be looked at. You know, we don't need to make another one. If we were, the county should be paying us to produce it. As it stands, we don't even really know what the proposed boundaries are to make this report in the first place. So in conclusion, there is a fundamental misunderstanding about what this report is. Your key assumption of 30 micrograms per cubic metre being safe is wrong. It is not this council's job to use its resource to produce this work, and what you're asking for is being done anyway. Read that report when it comes out. I oppose the motion.
Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I find this motion curiously incomplete. It goes on and on about nitrous oxide levels in Oxford, but omits any reference to other pollutants due to vehicle emissions. It might have been better tabled as a set of questions on notice rather than using up valuable time as a motion. In considering measures like low or zero emission zones, other pollutants must be taken into account as there's risk of very skewed implementation. Admittedly, nitrous oxide is linked to acid rain, smog and impacts on human health, but it's not the only one. As many councillors already know, there are several other pollutants contaminating the city of Oxford, particularly around the centre. One of the drivers behind the original Connecting Oxford plan, which was, after all, agreed enthusiastically by all parties at the time, was the ongoing need to reduce all forms of pollution for Oxford residents. For a start, hydrocarbons like benzene and the products of their complete or indeed partial combustion, these are known to cause illnesses, and some data shows they could be involved in causing cancer in sufficient concentration. Particulate matter, a mixture of solid particles and liquid droplets found in the air that contribute to atmospheric haze and can damage lungs and get into the bloodstream. Some studies have found these embedded in human tissue in those living or working in urban areas. Carbon monoxide. Cars emit carbon monoxide when fuel is burned. Breathing air with a high concentration of carbon monoxide affects critical organs like the heart and brain. According to various studies, as much as 95% of all CO emissions in cities comes from motor vehicle exhausts. UK government studies show that in 2020, transport produced 24% of the UK's total emissions in 2020 and remains the largest emitting sector in the UK. The majority, 91% of emissions, come from domestic transport, i.e. road vehicles. The biggest contributors to this were cars and taxis, which made up 52% of the emissions. Heavy goods vehicles, 19%, and vans, 16%. I cannot support this motion. It's incomplete, concentrates on nitrous dioxide and ignores the whole picture. Please vote against this.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm slightly, I'm not surprised, but again, the council use these things, the injuries and people are dying on the road. Yes, they are. And if you look at the fatality figures in city of Oxford or around, most fatality has been happening with a heavy duty vehicle. ZEZ, I always got confused. Probably I'm not intellectual as many members are here. Is zero emission mean I would think it'll be a walking pedestrian zone or zero mean NILT. But in here, the policy is as long as you pay us some money, you can drive any polluted vehicle you want in the city center. And this is where the revenue comes. So this should be not ZEZ, this should be a congestion charge. And if you want to have a congestion charge and ULEZ charge, this is fine, totally different policy. So first of all, the policy itself, I believe, is a very misleading. Because ZEZ, yeah, create it. We all want to live in a clean environment, healthier life. But when you talk about cycling city, Oxford is a dangerous cycling city. And thanks to the Labour, Liberal and Green County Council, because where is possible, they cannot provide a metal barrier safe cyclists. As a taxi driver, I see every day, cyclists end up in a pothole or in a broken drainage. And you just draw a epoxy white line and you're thinking, oh, it's a cycling city, look at it. I think writing a cycling city, we as authority should be ashamed of it, as long as we don't provide a cyclist a fair deal and fair protection. So we can sit here and talk about things. Banbury Road and Woodstock Road could be a prime example. You got plenty of room there, but the Liberal Labour Green, when they were running all this county council, they never had the effort to go and put some money and to make a prime example of a safe cycling city. All they went with the rhetoric. And we can hear all these, oh, this is that percent and that percent. Let them answer what the motion is. But in reality, where the road closure went, in my own ward, Holloway has breached pollution legal limit more than once. It's on the record. The city council has the data. So don't give us this. We against that. We want to, but do practical thing. Take the charges out, make a city center pedestrian zone. If you got the back of it, then we shall see. But as long as you pay us, you can drive any pollution vehicle in the city. So these are not what they say, so environment. These are chosen things for them. So they can be environmentalist when it suits them, and when the revenue comes, they can change their policies. Thank you.
Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So the gist of the motion is not a gotcha moment. It's let's have some more information before we make our mind. So if you was in favour, and people that have spoken against the motion, really what you'd say is we want yet more information. This motion is incomplete because it doesn't ask for enough information. Not the other way around. We don't want any information. We want to withhold that from the public. All this motion is asking that can we justify being part of something that costs £5.2 million without having information. So really, if anybody's against the motion, they should be asking for more information, not less data. So, but I'm glad this has been brought up because all it's shown is that the two main parties in here are anti-car, anti-motorist, and they carry on. Just before the elections, whatever they want to say, that is the reality, and that's what it's all about. It's about charging, crippling the motorist at source all the time. That's all I've got to say. And I will support the motion because in principle, it's asking for information. And I, for one, think that anybody who makes a decision, the more information he or she has, the more educated decision they can make. Thank you.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much. So, first of all, I will be opposing the motion. You know, I have a car, I drive a car, but I choose to cycle most of the time. I'm very ashamed to admit my car is actually diesel still. I haven't invested in yet. And sorry, I do intend to when I am able to afford it, be able to, from living in a terraced house, have that. But what I want to say, which is really important, and we've got a little protest, I think, going on in the back over there, and I agree with what they say. ZEZ is about climate policy, and climate policy has to start at home. If you want evidence, look at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's evidence. They've got multiple reports at a global level. We are not feeling the impacts as much as people elsewhere in the world. We are one of the richest countries in the world, and we're able to take this on the chin, as it were, in terms of investing to reduce the emissions, the transport emissions. We need to act local, and we must think beyond the city. We must think globally about those who are being impacted by climate change. And we're not doing enough at the moment. We're not doing it quickly enough. And so, I am against this motion because I think it's really important that we take urgent action. People are dying daily because of the impacts of our behaviour here, because we're driving too much for short errands when we should be walking or cycling, and letting the roads, if they are being used by people who have no alternative. But we need to take action now. This is climate policy. It's not just about a war on motorists. It's about the survival of our country and the universe. Thank you.
Councillor Ottino.
Hi, yeah, I mean, I would like to say that I'm in favour of decisions being formed by science, the science that might come from this or other reports. However, it is not this authority that will be making decisions on this matter, and so it isn't this authority that should have to bear the cost, money, officer time of doing this research. I represent residents in Northfield Brook. They're constantly coming to me with requests for solutions and things that need fixing, and constantly the issue is we don't have enough officer time or resources. We'll have even less if we divert officer time and resources to this. We have no guarantee that the County Council would even read what we've written or take any notice of it, and we've also heard that they are doing their own research, and this is too narrow an area to focus on. So it's not our decision, it's for another authority to make. They should be bearing the cost of it.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There is a complete inconsistency, not a huge surprise perhaps, in terms of the comments in this course of this meeting. So earlier on we were hearing from independent councillors that we shouldn't be contributing money towards CPZ schemes because they weren't the responsibility of this council, when actually we do collect still on behalf of the county council as well as the city council. But when it comes to work that is absolutely not in the scope of this council and would be additional work for which we are not being paid, which is not being required, and is actually being already commissioned by the county council, they're very happy to waste council taxpayers' money. I think Councillor Tina said it very well. We are, all of us, in favour of taking informed decisions, but what we are on this benches are not in favour of is wasting taxpayers' money just to make some petty political point.
Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's interesting, Councillor Brown's comment, because I was actually just about to make the reverse observation, which is that the administration can't really have its cake and eat it. When it's the case that it wants a policy that it supports, it suddenly puts it all over, has a lot of support for it. As soon as it's a tricky political position to be in, it suddenly raises the, but we're not the county council, of course, we're not the transport authority. And I think a little bit of consistency would be helpful. I think at heart, though, the motion is about getting more information and allowing more informed decision. And I think we need to be a little bit careful here. No one doubts the climate emergency. We need to be careful that when we talk about the importance of the climate emergency, we don't suddenly presume that anyone who holds an opposing view to us doesn't share some of those concerns. There are actually some really valid concerns about fully supporting a ZEZ proposal, and some of those are that actually in trying to get a ZEZ, which Oxfordshire has done, obviously it was the first authority in the country to do so. We may have been chasing a small, or we may have been chasing too large a challenge, which means that actually the implementation is much harder. And it's quite possible that actually having something like a ULEZ may have been more widely acceptable and may, in effect, actually have led to a better outcome for the climate emergency, more immediate change and quicker. So actually, I think we just need to be careful when we talk about the climate emergency, not to assume that there is only one way of, one way of achieving that. So I think I will be supporting the motion because I don't think the motion at heart actually talks about whether the proposals are necessarily good or bad. It does ask about more information, and I think the residents of Oxford do want that information in order to try and make more informed decisions. And I think it's valid that if we, as an authority, vote against this motion, residents will ask us on the doorstep, what are you trying to hide? And I don't have an answer to that, but I'd be grateful for answers on a postcard, please.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't intending to speak in this debate, but I think there was something said which I thought needed addressing, which was there was an implication made that somehow the zero emission zone policy is anti-motorist, and I find that quite a challenging statement to have heard, because fundamentally policies which are seeking to reduce emissions, whether it be emissions that are driving the climate emergency or emissions that are driving air pollution which harm human health, are not anti-motorist. They're pro-human health and they're pro-addressing the climate emergency. And those are things which will affect motorists just as much as everybody else. And so I think we need to just take stock of the fact that simply because at one given moment you are behind the wheel of a car does not make you immune from the impacts of that vehicle and policies which promote those vehicles. And so I just feel like that's a point that needs to be made, that what this is not about attacking motorists or making motorists' life more difficult, but what it is about is improving public health. And it's worth remembering, of course, that disproportionately the people who drive the most polluting vehicles are at the richest end of society, and those that suffer the effects of air pollution are at the poorest end of society. It's fundamentally a question of addressing public health, addressing the climate emergency, and addressing health inequalities as well. So if you hadn't worked it out by yet, of course I'll be voting against this motion. I'd encourage others to do so too.
Councillor Jafari Marbini.
I agree with a lot of what's been said already about the climate emergency, but there is something we need to acknowledge in this room, which is that the low traffic neighbourhoods have been applied in a way that has caused a lot of division and a lot of hardship on quite a lot of the multi-ethnic working classes. There has been a lot of people who are really struggling because public transport in Oxford is not great. Let's be honest about it. If you've got a family, if you are trying to get from kind of north to east, north to west, it's not actually that easy to use the buses. They're not that cheap. And not everyone can walk or cycle. It's just not possible for everyone. Not everyone has the confidence. Not everyone feels confident to cycle with children on the back. It's not for everybody, and there has been a lot of division caused because of a policy, I'm sorry, that was not evidenced very well and that was implemented quite poorly without good public transport in Oxford and Oxfordshire, which I think we would all support. So I'm a bit kind of stuck because I do feel like I take the point about that this is not necessarily the work of this council, but yet we make statements all the time about, and to say it's petty, I think a lot of the motions are on what people feel strongly about, whether they are a big issue or a small issue. And I would actually argue that, and a lot of our residents don't really distinguish between Labour County Group and Labour City Group, or any of us in our different groupings within city or county, because they see political parties as a whole. So I just think that I'm not sure that asking for more data is necessarily a bad thing. But I also understand the views that people are expressing about the fact that this is not necessarily part of the work of, immediately part of the work of this council, and it leaves out some other gases that are important in this area. But I I really would like everyone here to understand that the way the transport policies have been implemented have caused a lot of division, and I think actually have made the lives of some residents really, really hard.
Are there any further speakers on this motion? Yes.
What concerns me is that we focus a lot on motorists and cars. And I'd like to tell you the story of my 14-year-old fridge freezer, where there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, apart from one small component that is actually now not available anymore. Why does never anybody talk about the number of electrical appliances that we're throwing away every day because we can't get the pieces for them anymore? When I was a child, you bought a fridge, it lasted a lifetime. That doesn't happen anymore. And yet we sit in these chambers, we never talk about some of the other things. We're so concerned about the climate. Why are we not looking at other things as well?
Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. It's been interesting listening to this this evening, and I can hear passion in everybody's voice, and I look forward to hearing the summing up actually from the motion proposer. I won't be supporting the motion because I do think, in fact, actually it's incomplete, and it just doesn't really jar with what I think he's really wanting to do, which is trying to make little political points. But I was very, very pleased to hear, I think it was Councillor Malik, Sarge Malik, who mentioned that he was advocacy for separate cycling infrastructure. Absolutely agree with you, and that's what we do need. But we also need better public transport, and that's important as well. So it's a whole policy of things. And the last speaker has just mentioned about another thing that is affecting climate change, and that is our inability to recycle and reuse things. You mentioned electric equipment, so if I could just diverse, because that's not really what we're talking about with this particular motion this evening, but as it has been mentioned by another councillor, I'd like to say that. It's one of the reasons I became a councillor years ago, was because I was concerned about the environment. And in fact, that very slogan that is up in the public gallery is absolutely still right to champion that, as it was, I think now, I believe, that's about 20, 30 years old, that slogan now, but it still resonates now. And you're absolutely right. In India, where I worked once, BC, before children, but they still true to now, that they actually managed to keep their electrical equipment going on and on and on. In this country, I think the average life of a washing machine is 6 to 7 years. In India, it's more like 30 or 35 years. So there is the ability to do that. We're just not doing it in this country enough. So I do agree with you on that point, but I cannot agree with this particular motion. It doesn't help us for climate action. Thank you.
If there are no more speakers, then I will bring in Councillor Yateman, who reserves his right.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's essential that this council understands the recent and current air quality levels before knowing whether this is a scheme to support. The extended ZEZ will act as an additional tax on many residents with the greatest impact felt by those with the least disposable income. Those who can afford an electric vehicle won't pay it. Those who can afford a new V8 Range Rover can probably afford to pay it. It's the workers with multiple part-time jobs, the tradesmen and women, the mobile workers, along with retails, etc., within the expanded zone who will suffer. Too often, we're seeing schemes like these introduced by our county colleagues without a full disclosure of their impact, where we see a quality impact assessments which seem just like a tick box exercise. This is a starting point for an open and honest discussion with the public, which is a premise you should surely support. Thank
you. Councillor Henwood.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your input. I do appreciate them. I do acknowledge that nitrogen dioxide is not one single pollutant. I think there are many in the atmosphere. We are, however, in this motion, asking for information. That's all we are asking for. We want to be honest and open with our public and be transparent about what the levels are and what they intend to be. I think that's reasonable. I think it's unreasonable to pretend otherwise. We've seen the Liberal Democrats and the Labour group introduce an LTN scheme that's brought chaos, confusion and congestion to this city. It's unforgivable. We are in the process of trying to be democratic and transparent. We want to see what those levels are, and we want to be accountable to our public and show them what the data is. This is the underpinning message of this motion. Now, some people in this hall have mentioned cars and vehicles. I'm a designer of cars and vehicles. I design low-carbon bicycles that are electrically driven. I design and make electric vehicles, consciously trying to bring down my carbon footprint of the vehicles I want to drive and ride in the future. I think we all have that responsibility. This motion doesn't mention cars, and we should go back and remember that carbon dioxide is a component or a product of combustion, okay? And cars are not just the only vehicles that produce carbon dioxide. So boilers, heating products across Oxford in the city also produce carbon dioxide. It is this data that we would like to see. In previous reports, non-transportation nitrogen dioxide was measured at 60%. We're not measuring that. Okay, we brought down vehicle usage within Oxford and carbon dioxide levels have reduced. But it's these other instruments that produce carbon dioxide we also should be focused on. And that's one of the reasons why we would like to look at not just carbon dioxide in relation to vehicles, but globally, what is our picture and where are we and what should our future goals be? I think it's wrong to just look at vehicles when we are all guilty of using the vehicle to transportation. But thank you very much, everybody, for contributing to this debate. I do really appreciate it. But again, I emphasize we're asking for data and we're asking to be transparent. We're asking to be a democracy. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
We will now take a vote on the motion. All those in favour, please show. That's 8, I believe. All those against? And are there any abstentions? 1. The motion falls. Thank you. We now move on to motion B, proposed by Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So, as everybody's aware, the County Council again have just imposed a change to all our residents. When lots of residents are having difficulty, especially around transport at the moment, this is just another indictment of how they have a total disregard for our residents. So that, and we all live in a world where, you know, if something's not broken, why fix it? Scratch cards systems are working very well. They don't print millions. It's only upon request. So I doubt the efficiency change is that relevant to this. It's excluding lots of people that are scared, vulnerable, and just quite frankly, are scared, you know, they don't want to go onto the internet. They don't know how to, and they're embarrassed to ask somebody else to go to, for them to do that. So all I'm asking in this motion really is that we have something that works already well, it works really well. Everybody seems to be able to use it. So why change something when it's not broken? So at the moment, we have this system. The cost savings that they portray, I doubt if they are that well. It's another way of confusing people, residents, visitors, tracking visitors of who registers whose car where. I'm not sure that we want that kind of open knowledge outside of who visits my home or your home. So essentially my motion, this motion just asks for us to keep what's there because it works really well. It's the county's responsibility. The council taxes are high. It's their responsibility to fund this, and at the moment it works. Our residents are confident. Let's give our residents some support with something they're happy with instead of just imposing another level of bureaucracy upon them. Thank you.
Councillor Latif has seconded. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now. Thank you, Lord Mayor. So whilst I don't oppose, well, actually, I should start with declaration of interest. I live in an area which has a CPZ, and therefore I have to apply for these visitor permits. And I don't mind sharing that as someone who's meant to be IT literate, I have 2 degrees, I'm proud to say, I struggle with the system. And I say I don't mind sharing that with people. And so whilst I don't oppose the use of some form of digital permits, there are several issues with the county's new system, which is largely exclusively digital, and I don't think they've been thought through. And unfortunately, they impose a significant burden, particularly on the residents of Oxford. Some of those issues, so the issue of going online, so as the county has recently released some mutterings that, oh yes, if people can prove a hardship, actually we'll still allow them to have, you know, the old scratch card system. But there's no clarity over what level of proof is going to be needed, what's the level of hardship that needs to be presented by residents. And actually, if you have had any dealings with the county council, you will find how didactic they can be and how dogmatic in many ways. I've had many residents who I've had to support with the not only applications on this, but applications for tradespeople as new CPZs came into my area, having been since I became a city councillor, and long-term projects that had been planned suddenly became very difficult. And the county council had a very blanket, no, sorry, the computer says no policy. So I'm afraid I don't have much faith, and most of the residents that I speak to don't have much faith. And it's interesting, I've received several emails since the paperwork for this meeting was released from residents who I don't know, just saying, we really support you in this measure, and we're really grateful for you taking it forward. A couple of the other points to make. So there's a suggestion that, oh, don't worry, there'll be a phone line over here that you can call. Of course, if you try it, you probably won't get through, and it's of little help to residents who have difficulties with permits in the evenings and weekends, which is when visitors are most likely to visit, and of course is when council phone lines are most likely to be closed. And I have actually had residents where I've gone to support them in making the application for visitors' permits. So, you know, I've actually gone to help them log online, help them fill in the form. Not people that, you know, not my mum and dad, people that actually just live in my ward and have really struggled and got in touch and said, look, I just don't understand this system. And that's just to get the 25 batch of permits that you would land on your doorstep, let alone each time someone visits. A few other things which I don't think really the county council have thought through. So at the moment, the current system allows you to have 25 days or 25 24-hour periods where you can have visitors. The new system reduces that quite significantly because now you can only have 25 visitors. You can't have 25 24-hour periods. And if we conservatively estimate that each day someone uses the permit, they might have 2 visitors. I mean, it's probably higher than that. Actually, what will happen is that the new system will actually lead to a reduction in the number of visitors that each resident can have, and it will halve it. And this is most likely to impact the most vulnerable in our society, including the elderly. It's worth noting, as a healthcare professional, I'll share with you that the single most significant marker for mortality is not your blood pressure, it's not whether you've had a previous history of cancer, it's how lonely you are. Okay, how lonely you are. And this policy will do nothing to help that, it will exacerbate that inequity. As Councillor Rahman has said, the new system requires that you input the number plate. Is that time or 10 seconds?
Time.
Okay, I'll send, and thank you.
Thank you. There's an amendment in the name of Councillor Ottino.
Okay, thank you for bringing this motion. Accessibility for all to the services we provide is important to us, and equally important is that we challenge other organisations around accessibility to their services. There's rightly been some anxiety from residents on this issue, and it's right that we speak up for them. However, we need to make sure that in doing so, we don't increase that stress and anxiety for residents by muddling the facts. For that reason, I can't support the motion as it is. I think the facts are muddled, but ask you to support our amendment. In the first paragraph, which we insert, it recognises that the county have made some response to public feedback. It is a criticism that they weren't more clear about this up front. The insertions we put in, firstly, add for greater clarification and better communication about the criteria that they will have for people being able to still have paper permits. And secondly, ask for the monitoring of the process. We know we and other bodies don't always get exactly details right the first time, and when we bring in change, and we will need to modify things. The last paragraph we've taken out because we believe it is factually incorrect and needs to be deleted. CPZs are meant to be self-funding. Admin and implementation costs are covered by the cost of the permit. They're not funded from council tax. In proposing this amendment, I am aware that there potentially is an increased cost for paper digital permits, but which inevitably be reflected in the cost of the price of permits, but that is the cost of accessibility for all. So I ask you to please to support the amendment.
Councillor Smith, do you wish to speak now or reserve your rights?
I'll speak now, thank you. Yeah, so I'm seconding this amendment on behalf of the Labour Group, not because we're Luddites. We fully understand the need for public services to move online and for things to be digitised. Just recently, as a council, introduced an online tenants portal for our council tenants to report repairs and self-serve online, which we're encouraging people to use. But what's important is that it's done in a way which doesn't exclude people that don't have access to technology, first of all. And secondly, that it's actually done in a competent way in terms of the software and the technical side of it, so that people who are tech savvy don't end up tearing their hair out trying to use a website which is repeatedly crashing, or it's sending them around in circles as they try and log in, which is the experience of too many people. And I have to say, the fact that the County Council hasn't got this right, it's another huge red flag in terms of what they're proposing for the future, which is going to affect far more people in terms of the traffic filters and the hideously complicated system of permits which they're proposing for that. I mean, I have no confidence that they'll be able to do that properly. So I hope you'll accept our amendment because I think it improves on what you've written. Thank you.
We now move into debate on the amendment. I've seen five people. Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I too support the amended motion. A lot of my residents have complained to me about and are anxious about this, and the county is right to have responded, to have listened, and to say that people can have paper permits. But I think I disagree with Councillor Raymond in that scratch cards didn't work well, and so it is right to bring in a digitised system. Scratch cards were open to abuse, people handed them on, and that in turn cost the county money. I'd also point out that in terms of the elderly, and we're absolutely right to worry about people who need to have more visitors. Over 70s have always been allowed to have double the number of permits, quite rightly, so that they, which takes account of their need to have more visitors. That isn't going to change at all. It is incumbent on all public bodies, though, not to move faster than their most vulnerable residents, and we and other authorities should always bear that in mind when we're moving towards digitisation. But I support the amended motion.
Councillor Ross-Smith.
I'd like to speak when the other substantive motion, when that is, if this amendment is agreed or lost first. So I'd like to reserve my right to speak on the amendment.
Sorry, your point is on the motion itself?
Yeah, on the motion itself. When it's agreed, yeah.
In which case, we move on to Councillor Smoten.
Thank you very much. Before I start, just a point of information. Councillor Latif brought up the point about days versus visitors. I am 99% certain that that was not a distinction, actually, that it was always against the terms of use of one of the scratch cards to use it in 2 different vehicles in the course of a single day. and that if you had done that and gotten away with it, well, frequently people get away with parking illegally. But I am 99% certain that the terms of use were that you are supposed to use a scratch card per visitor, not a scratch card for an entire day, even if you have 20 different visitors in the course of that day. So I don't think that is actually a distinction. It does, of course, distinguish how likely one is to get away with illegal parking. That is what it actually changes. Right, back to the actual remarks themselves. Thank you very much, Councillors Tina and Smith, for advancing the amendment. This is exactly the right point. The county is retaining paper permits for people who are not able to use an online system. And of course, our job as councillors is to make sure that absolutely everybody who needs to keep those paper permits does so. And I'm going to be doing that job with gusto, and I know everybody in this room is going to be doing that as well. It's going to save taxpayers money by going paperless where that is possible, where that is suitable for the individual. And I want to underscore the key point here. The paper permits are being retained, because if you read the motion, you would think that that was not true. And I really, really hope that in press releases or any other place where this is being described, you do include that vital piece of context. Because the risk here is digital exclusion, right? The risk here is that people think that they can't grok the system, and therefore they're going to have to give up on having visitors come to visit them in their cars, when actually there is an alternative. So don't let people think otherwise. Make sure that you are emphasizing that those paper permits are retained, that yes, it is still possible for you to get them, and yes, if you need them, they are going to be there for you. Don't let people be excluded because they don't know that that's possible. The taxpayers' money that's going to be saved here by going digital where that is suitable for the individual, it's going to be used to fix potholes and patch pavements, but moreover, it's going to be used to rebuild our special educational needs system. And it's going to handle an ever-increasing social care caseload, a system which has been badly in need of reform for well over a decade. Continuing to burn public money on printing, postage, and admin when a resident is quite happy using the website, that simply can't be justified. It can't be justified in the city, or in the county, or in the country. Councillors, please support the amendment.
A point of personal clarification, please, Lord Mayor. I'm grateful to Councillor Smoten for his 99% assurance. Having looked at the County Council's website, there's every chance that his 1% of uncertainty might mean that his statement is incorrect. And in the absence of that 100% certainty, I'd be grateful for you withdrawing that statement until it has been clarified. Thank you.
I will reiterate that I am very confident that is the case. If it turns out not to be the case, you shall have my apology.
No longer 99%. Thank you.
Councillor Azad.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wish to remind my colleagues that there's thousands of senior citizens still driving on Oxford Road safely and happily and using the local parking facilities. I am one of them. We wasn't born in an age of technology. We live about half our life without this modern technology. And it will be very, very confusing for these people to use the new system. I will still happily use the scratch cards. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I will also be supporting the amendment because the amendment actually corrects some highly misleading information, which if the public believed it all to be true would not be helpful, as some of my colleagues have already said. But there is a need for greater clarity about the criteria by which these permits will be allowed to be used on a paper basis. We do need to hold the County Council accountable in the end for the proper execution of this scheme. I often think about the County Council, you know, if it was the only organisation in the world, it would manage to have a fight with itself. Because actually, you know, there's actually a pattern these days of, you know, half-baked, you know, announcements about policies, then rowing back because the communication is poor and the consultation is almost non-existent. We had the same issue, frankly, with street lighting recently, where again, you know, it all went off on the wrong foot and the County Council had to withdraw it and go back to clarifying its position. I'm uneasy too about, you know, the whole issue of the digitally disadvantaged. As the Cabinet Member for Customer Services, Customer Service in this Council, we have been scrupulously careful over the last few years to make sure we get the right balance between telephone services, face-to-face services, and digital services. And while we are encouraging and working harder to give more people the opportunity and get to go digital, not at the exclusion of the digitally disadvantaged, who have poor broadband services, if any, have poor IT skills, have poor IT full stop, and it's just not fair that they are excluded from the system and from access to things. So I'm anxious about these changes. I'm anxious whether the County Council will execute them properly, I hope they do, but I say I remain anxious about it. And therefore, that's why I'll be supporting the amendment, because the amendment is accurate and fair, but it also puts the County Council on the spot to do well in this area, having decided to make the changes. Thank you very much.
Councillors, we have 10 minutes remaining, at which point we will have to move to votes on the amendment, and then the motion subject to, I hope, brief rights of reply from Councillor Ottino and Councillor Raymond. However, we have another 10 minutes, so taking speakers in order, Councillor Brown.
Got the wrong microphone. Thank you, Lord Mayor. So back in November, very beginning of November, 3rd of November, to be precise, when I first became aware of this change that the County Council were proposing, I wrote to Councillor Leffman, to Councillor Gant and to Councillor Judy Roberts, because I wasn't entirely sure which of them were directly responsible for it, and raised my deep concerns on behalf of residents of this city at the proposals, because I was very concerned, for all the reasons that have been outlined, about the digitally excluded in our city having to go through a rather complicated process. I got an acknowledgement of that email. That's pretty much it, to be honest. I do, however, think that a number of changes have been made to the policy as a result of representations made, obviously not just by me, but many, many residents. So I am glad to see the changes that have been brought forward. I do share some of the concerns that have been raised about still the difficulties with the system. I do think it is unnecessarily complicated for people, and I don't think it is perfect. So I will, if this motion passes in its, I hope, amended form, because that makes some really important corrections to just inaccuracies in the original motion, I will happily write again to the leader of the County Council and her cabinet members. I did again last week write to them. I haven't had an acknowledgement in response to that email, which I wrote a week ago. So we'll wait and see if I get a response.
Okay, I am being told we have time for one further speaker in debate, which is Councillor Ross Smith, you indicated.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you for the amendment. I agree with the amendment. But I would like to just give a bit of background, actually, as to why this has happened. When we had our first controlled parking zone, that's a CPZ introduced, it was quite a large area. In fact, it's one of the areas that does need review, and I'm pleased to hear that it's going to finally happen. Quite an important thing to happen. But as we've gradually seen the CPZs increase and more residents asking for them, originally part of the area that I represent, Quarry Conservation Area residents, said, no, we don't want a CPZ. But they came round to seeing that actually it was needed because they had more and more commuter parking and more and more vehicles being parked on the roads. They could not park near their own homes. And so they voted for a controlled parking zone to be put in. The consultation with that was over several weeks and months, and we had a reconsultation and changes to it. So the council does listen to consultations. And I have to say, as local councillor, I was out for several weeks with officers going around each individual road, talking to any resident that would want to question where a double yellow line or a white line was going to be and how that would affect the controlled parking zone. So it's really important, but there are residents that want them. Now, one of the consequences of having this large number now of controlled parking zones in the city means that there is a set of cards, scratch cards, for every single one. Can you imagine what the storage is on that? I mean, I was absolutely amazed. I was invited to go and have a look at it. When it started, there was just one little office in Speedwell Street, I don't know if you remember it there, and you could go and collect your cards and things, which was great. But that was just, you know, one set of shelves behind them at a counter. Now, the storage for it takes up a whole room from floor to ceiling with these cards. And not only that, it's very, very labour intensive as well. But the other side of it is the cost as well of postage. Very, very expensive. As we all know, the Royal Mail costs have gone up. First class stamp is over £1 now. I can't believe it, it's so expensive. So that is something the council has to consider. The cost of doing it, both in officer time and in postage and cost generally. So going digital was part of the way of transformation, like many, many councils have done. Many councils have actually put their vehicle permits for parking online. In fact, they have been online for some time. Now, I had residents contact me, particularly elderly residents who don't have access to the internet. Some do, not all, but there are some that don't, and they were worried about having that, and they were I rest assured them that they could get their visitors' parking permits, the scratch ones, still. So there'll still be some storage problems at County Hall with this, and costs involved. But going digital is going to bring the costs down for taxpayers, and I think that is important. We need to recognise that. We're not getting the full grants from government, we all know that, and there's a lot of financial pressure on all councils at all levels, and I think we need to consider that too. But we also need to consider those that feel excluded. I have to say, my own experience of going online to get visitors' parking permits, I got a bit stuck because I couldn't get my printer, to do the copying.
Time's up, sorry.
Right, thank you. But I did get eventually somebody very, very helpful on the end of the phone who walked it through and did it in 3 minutes for me.
Thank you. We will move on to summing up on the amendment. Councillor Ottino. Waiving your right to do that, in which case we take a vote on the amendment. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And are there any abstentions? The amendment is carried. Councillor Raymond, to sum up on the main motion.
Okay, so we heard quite a lot about misinformation. You know, we've had contradicting sides for the same argument, that on one side parking and all the costs associated with permits are self-funding, and on the other side they're going to have that money saved fixing potholes. So I'm not sure if the misinformation is coming from me or it's coming from somewhere else. Secondly, this is all about choice. The choice that is made for residents to go. There's actually nothing wrong with going digital if you want to go digital, but the point was, it's about choice. This is about imposing stuff on people when residents are already feeling crushed about everything else that's happening. And if you read, the people that can still have paper cards, they can't use the internet, they don't have the internet, they don't have a family member, they don't have a neighbour, and they don't have a friend who can use the internet. They're the ones that will be excluded, and they can have the digital thing. They can have a scratch card. So that's like a kind of straitjacket. So I suggest that maybe we should revisit this after all of us have gone and read it all again. And the other thing that I was picking up, just the last thing, I was told that they're printed on demand, so they're not all stored there as they go along. And I would assume that, you know, as we need more, somebody will just order them instead of having a whole room. But hey, that's the county council under this administration. Careless with our money, careless with our roads, careless with everything. So that doesn't surprise me either. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to a vote on the main motion as amended. All those in favour, please show. Be unanimous. Good. Thanks. That concludes item 16. we have 2 minutes left, which is not time to introduce another motion. I therefore call the meeting to a close. Thank you.